Hello, Bible readers. It is Thursday, March 4th. We're reading from 2 Kings chapters 8 through 10, and then 1 Corinthians chapter 15 through the end, chapter 16, 24. 1 Corinthians, we took it in small bites, but as you see, Paul, even small bites require lots of thought, prayer. What does this mean? Gets asked a lot. I'm reminded of how thick Paul's letters are. Maybe I'll start there. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 50 to 57, that gets read at most funerals. It's a mouthful, as you know, our perishability must put on imperishability, our mortal bodies must put on immortality. It's a mouthful, but this mystery of what resurrection is really about is worth, shouting from the rooftops. It's worth a mouthful. Therefore, be steadfast, he says in verse 58. That verse could kind of stand alone. Like I've just said, this very eloquent, long statement of what resurrection is really about, which is the cornerstone of our faith, the whole point really of what we hope in. And so the therefore, in this day and age, it would have been a pretty formal way to kind of end your argument or your statement, whatever it is. Therefore, be steadfast. I mean, there's a study all on its own to talk about what steadfast could really look like in our lives. Okay, then we get to chapter 16. At the Jerusalem conference, you might remember, Paul promised to call upon his Gentile churches to make a goodwill offering to the poor among the saints in Jerusalem. Paul follows through, we see here and elsewhere in other letters, and he does so across we think a 2-year span. These just bold requests for financial generosity have shaped the church's understanding of stewardship, to put money in its place and think it's just money. And so Paul just goes for it and says, here's an opportunity for you to be generous. And then we see beyond the collection, Paul's plans, his present goals, his travel plans of fellow evangelists that are traveling along with him. He offers a commendation and then a greeting. It's a letter. Chapter 16 ends like a human letter. And I think it adds some authenticity to see kind of all the little ways that someone 2,000 years ago would have ended a letter, much like we do now. Back to 2 Kings. In 1 Kings, you might remember, and you might not, that's why I'm going to say it. You might remember in 1 Kings that Omri, O-M-R-I, started a dynasty. During his son Ahab's reign, Elijah, the prophet at the time, prophesied the end of that dynasty. Remember, that's kind of what gets Elijah in all that trouble. He and Ahab butted heads. So we're about to hear the story of the dynasty's end. But first, in chapter 8, there's a few loose ends to tie up. Elisha, you might notice, has a pattern really to his prophetic ministry. He'll have a dramatic success in an international incident, and then offer his attention to an individual, like this widow again. So that's Elisha's pattern oftentimes, is he does big things, and then he does big things for smaller numbers of people. And then chapter 9 and 10, we get at Elijah's prophecy come true, the end of this dynasty. Jehu, Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat. These are two great names. Jehu makes right an old wrong. Remember that Naboth was murdered back in 1 Kings chapter 21. This is like a soap opera. Elijah then prophesied that Ahab and Jezebel and their descendants all would fare poorly. Jehu is God's instrument of death in this circumstance. So complete is the judgment of God against the sins of Ahab, I'd say. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.